What happened next will shock you to your core. A simple birthday party turned into a nightmare that saved thousands of children across America. If you haven't already, please like, share, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, the story you are about to listen to will change how you look at your child's toys forever. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Wilson family's backyard in Cedar Falls, Oregon. 8-year-old Mia bounced on her toes as her mom, Sarah, hung colorful streamers between the oak trees. Today was special. Today was her birthday, and everyone she loved would be there to celebrate with her. "Mom, when is Uncle Ray coming?" Mia asked for the 5th time that morning, her pigtails swaying as she peered down the quiet suburban street. "He promised he'd bring Max." Sarah smiled, adjusting a balloon that had come loose from the fence. "He'll be here soon, sweetheart. You know Uncle Ray never breaks his promises." Ray Martinez wasn't just Mia's favorite uncle. He was Officer Martinez to the rest of Cedar Falls, a respected police officer who had served the community for 15 years. But what made him truly special in Mia's eyes was his partner, Max, a retired German Shepherd who had spent 7 years as one of the finest canine officers in the state. Max had helped solve dozens of cases, from finding missing children to detecting dangerous substances that could harm innocent people. The backyard filled with laughter as neighbors and family arrived. Mrs. Peterson from next door brought her famous chocolate chip cookies. The Thompson twins ran around chasing bubbles, while their parents set up folding chairs. Mia's grandparents arrived with arms full of presents, adding to the growing pile on the picnic table. "There he is!" Mia squealed, running toward the gate as a familiar black pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Uncle Ray stepped out, his off-duty clothes replacing his usual uniform, but his warm smile unchanged. From the passenger seat emerged Max, a majestic German Shepherd whose dark eyes held the wisdom of years spent protecting and serving. Despite being retired for 2 years, Max still carried himself with the confidence of a working dog. "Happy birthday, birthday girl," Ray called out, scooping Mia into a bear hug. Max trotted over, his tail wagging as Mia dropped to her knees to hug him. "I missed you, Max," she whispered into his fur. The dog seemed to understand, nuzzling against her cheek with gentle affection. "Max missed you too," Ray said, ruffling Mia's hair. "He's been asking about you all week." Sarah watched from the porch, her heart warming at the sight. Ray had been like a father to Mia ever since her husband David had died in a car accident 3 years ago. The bond between Mia and Max had grown even stronger during those difficult months when the dog seemed to sense the little girl's grief and stayed close to comfort her. "Uncle Ray, look at all my presents!" Mia gestured excitedly toward the table where gift boxes of various sizes sat wrapped in bright paper and ribbons. "Wow, that's quite a haul," Ray laughed. "Someone's been very good this year." The party moved into full swing as more guests arrived. Children ran through the sprinkler, while adults gathered in the shade, sharing stories and cold drinks. Max found his favorite spot under the maple tree, content to watch the festivities with the patient demeanor that had made him such an excellent working dog. "Cake time," Sarah announced, carrying out a beautiful Princess Castle cake decorated with pink roses and silver towers. 8 candles flickered in the gentle breeze as everyone gathered around the picnic table. Mia closed her eyes tight, made her wish, and blew out the candles in one breath. Everyone cheered and clapped as Sarah began cutting slices of cake, the sweet vanilla scent mixed with the smell of summer grass and blooming flowers. "Present time!" called out Grandma Wilson, clapping her hands together. This was the moment Mia had been waiting for. She sat cross-legged on the grass as the adults arranged themselves in a circle around her. The gift table looked like a treasure chest with its colorful wrapping paper and shiny bows. Max had been lying peacefully under his tree, but as the present opening began, he lifted his head. His ears perked up slightly, and his nose twitched. Ray noticed the subtle change in his partner's demeanor, but didn't think much of it. After all, there were a lot of new smells at a party. Food, people, different perfumes, and soaps. Mia started with the smaller gifts. A jewelry box from her grandparents that played a tiny ballerina song. Art supplies from the Thompsons. A new backpack for school from Mrs. Peterson. Each gift brought squeals of delight and thank you hugs. Max stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and focused. Ray glanced over, noting how the dog's entire body had tensed. His tail was no longer wagging, and his ears were pointed forward in alert mode. "What is it, boy?" Ray asked quietly, but Max's attention was fixed entirely on the gift table. This one's from my friend Katie's family, Sarah said, lifting a medium-sized box wrapped in shimmery purple paper with a large silver bow. The box was heavier than it looked, and it rattled slightly when moved. The moment Sarah set the box in front of Mia, Max's behavior changed completely. A low, rumbling growl started deep in his chest. The sound was so unusual that conversations around the yard began to quiet down. Max? Mia looked toward the dog with concern. In all the years she'd known him, she had never heard him make that sound around her. Ray was on his feet immediately. His years of working with Max had taught him to trust the dog's instincts completely. When Max alerted to something, there was always a reason. "Maybe we should," Ray started to say, but Max was already moving. The dog crossed the yard in 3 powerful strides, his training taking over despite his retirement. He positioned himself between Mia and the purple-wrapped box, his growl growing louder and more insistent. "What's wrong with him?" asked Mrs. Thompson, pulling her twins closer to her. "I don't know," Sarah said, reaching for the box. "Maybe he doesn't like the wrapping paper or—" Max barked once, sharp and commanding. It was his alert bark, the same one he'd used hundreds of times during his career when he detected something dangerous. Everyone in the yard froze. Ray moved slowly toward his partner, his hand extended in a calming gesture. "Easy, Max. What do you smell, boy?" But Max wasn't backing down. His eyes were locked on the purple box, and every instinct in his body was screaming that something was wrong. He took another step forward, his nose inches from the package. "Should we move the box away?" Sarah asked nervously. "Nobody touch anything," Ray said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used at work. Years of experience had taught him that when Max alerted this strongly to something, it was serious. Mia looked confused and a little scared. "Uncle Ray, what's happening? Why is Max upset?" Before Ray could answer, Max made his move. With surgical precision, he grabbed the corner of the wrapping paper with his teeth and pulled. The shimmery purple paper tore away, revealing a plain cardboard box underneath. "Max, no!" Sarah called out, but the dog was in full working mode now. His powerful paws scraped at the box, tearing through the cardboard with determination. Ray realized he couldn't stop Max even if he wanted to. The dog was following his training, and something had triggered every alarm in his highly trained system. The cardboard gave way, and packing materials scattered across the grass. Inside was what appeared to be a perfectly normal children's toy, a large plush unicorn with a sparkly pink mane and a silver horn. It looked innocent enough, exactly the kind of gift an 8-year-old girl would love. But Max wasn't finished. His growling intensified as he circled the toy, his nose working overtime. Then, with movements that seemed almost frantic, he grabbed the unicorn in his mouth and began shaking it violently. "Max, stop!" Mia cried, tears forming in her eyes as she watched her beloved friend destroy what should have been a beautiful gift. Stuffing flew everywhere as Max's teeth found their target. The unicorn split open along a seam, white polyester filling scattering like snow across the grass. But Max didn't stop there. He continued to tear at the toy's interior, his nose guiding him to something specific. And then everyone saw it. Hidden deep inside the unicorn's stuffing, wrapped in a small plastic bag, was a metal vial about the size of a prescription bottle. The vial had strange markings on its label, symbols and numbers that didn't look like any language anyone at the party recognized. Ray felt his blood run cold. In his years as a police officer, he'd seen enough to know that normal children's toys didn't come with hidden metal containers. And Max's reaction told him everything he needed to know about how dangerous this might be. "Everyone step back," he ordered, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. "Sarah, call 911 right now." "What? Why? I don't understand what's happening," Sarah stammered, but she was already reaching for her phone. Max sat down next to the destroyed toy, his mission accomplished. He looked up at Ray with intelligent eyes that seemed to say, "I did my job." Even in retirement, his training and instincts had kicked in to protect the people he loved. The birthday party atmosphere had completely evaporated. Parents were gathering their children, moving them away from the picnic table. Grandma Wilson held Mia close, the little girl's eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Uncle Ray, what was in my present?" Mia asked in a small voice. Ray knelt down beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but Max knew something was wrong, and we always trust Max." The sound of sirens grew louder as emergency vehicles approached the house. Ray had specifically requested a hazmat team. Whatever was in that vial, he wasn't taking any chances with a yard full of children and families. Sarah ended her phone call and walked over to Ray, her face pale. They're sending everyone. Fire department, hazmat, detectives. Ray, what do you think is in there? Ray looked at the metal vial lying in the grass, surrounded by the remains of what should have been an innocent toy. Max sat guard beside it, still alert but calmer now that he'd neutralized what he perceived as a threat. I don't know, Ray said honestly, but in 7 years of working with Max, I've never seen him react like this to anything that wasn't dangerous. The first responders arrived within minutes. Firefighters in hazmat suits carefully collected the vial and the remains of the toy, sealing everything in special containers. The backyard that had been filled with laughter and celebration just an hour ago now looked like a crime scene. Detective Maria Santos, Ray's longtime colleague, approached him as the hazmat team finished their work. Ray, what happened here? Ray explained the sequence of events while Max remained at his side, still watchful but no longer agitated now that the threat had been removed. And you're sure Max has never reacted to a regular toy like this before? Detective Santos asked. Never, Ray confirmed. Max was trained to detect narcotics, explosives, and accelerants. His nose is more accurate than most lab equipment. If he reacted this strongly, there's something in that vial that triggered his training. Detective Santos made notes in her pad. We'll need to interview everyone who was here today, and we'll need to trace where this gift came from. Sarah, do you know who brought this present? Sarah shook her head, looking overwhelmed. Mia said it was from Katie's family, but I haven't talked to them yet. The gifts just kept arriving, and I put them all on the table. We'll need Katie's family's contact information, Detective Santos said gently. This might all turn out to be nothing, but we have to treat it as a potential threat until we know for sure. As the party guests gave their statements and contact information, Mia sat on the porch steps with Max beside her. The dog had returned to his gentle, protective demeanor, sensing the little girl's distress. Max saved me, didn't he? Mia asked Ray as he sat down beside them. He might have, Ray admitted. We won't know for sure until the lab tests that vial, but Max doesn't make mistakes about these things. Will I get in trouble for having a bad present? Mia's voice was small and worried. No, sweetheart, Ray said, pulling her into a hug. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes bad people try to hurt good people, but that's why we have heroes like Max to protect us. Max seemed to understand he was being praised. His tail wagged slowly as he rested his head on Mia's lap, offering the comfort he'd been trained to provide. The sun was setting by the time the last emergency vehicle left the Wilson house. The birthday party decorations still hung from the trees, but the celebration felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Sarah sat at the kitchen table with Ray, both of them trying to process what had occurred. I keep thinking about what could have happened, Sarah said, her voice shaking. If Max hadn't been here, if he hadn't reacted the way he did. Don't go down that road, Ray advised. Max was here, and he did his job. That's what matters now. The phone rang, and Sarah answered with trembling hands. Hello? Mrs. Wilson, this is Detective Santos. I have some preliminary information about the vial your dog found. Sarah put the call on speaker so Ray could hear. What did you find out? The lab ran some quick tests. The substance inside the vial is a chemical compound that's been banned for use in consumer products in the United States. It's primarily used in industrial applications, but in concentrated form like this, it could be harmful, especially to children. Ray felt a chill run down his spine. How harmful? Potentially very harmful if ingested or if it had broken open and been inhaled. The good news is that it was sealed properly, so there was no immediate danger to anyone at the party. But if this had ended up in a child's hands... Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the implications. Detective Santos, do we know how this ended up in a toy? That's what we're investigating now. We've contacted Katie's parents, and they're as shocked as you are. They purchased the unicorn from an online retailer called Star Glow Toys. They had no idea there was anything unusual about it. Ray leaned forward. Star Glow Toys? I've never heard of them. Neither had we until today. They appear to be a relatively new company that specializes in children's toys sold through social media platforms. We're looking into their business practices and manufacturing processes. After Detective Santos hung up, the house fell into an uneasy quiet. Mia had fallen asleep on the couch, with Max curled up beside her, both of them exhausted by the day's events. Ray, Sarah said quietly, what if this wasn't an accident? What if someone deliberately put that chemical in a toy meant for children? Ray had been thinking the same thing, but he hadn't wanted to voice his suspicions. Let's wait and see what the investigation turns up. It could still be a manufacturing error or contamination during shipping. But even as he said the words, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than a simple mistake. Max's reaction had been too intense, too focused. The dog had sensed something that went beyond accidental contamination. As the night wore on, Ray couldn't stop thinking about the metal vial and the strange markings on its label. In his years of police work, he'd learned to trust his instincts almost as much as he trusted Max's nose. And right now, both were telling him that this was just the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous than anyone realized. The birthday party that was supposed to be filled with joy and celebration had become the starting point of an investigation that would soon capture the attention of the entire country. But for now, all that mattered was that a little girl was safe, sleeping peacefully with her four-legged guardian watching over her. Max had done what he was trained to do: protect innocent people from danger they couldn't see coming. As Ray watched the dog's steady breathing and alert ears, he knew that retirement or not, Max would always be ready to serve and protect the people he loved. The question that haunted Ray as he prepared to leave the Wilson house was simple but terrifying. If there was one contaminated toy, how many others were out there, waiting to harm unsuspecting children? The next morning brought news that would shake the entire investigation to its core. Ray's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with a call from Detective Santos, her voice tight with urgency. "Ray, we have a problem. A big one." Ray sat up in bed, instantly alert. What happened? The lab finished their full analysis of the chemical compound. It's not just banned. It's a synthetic neurological agent that was developed for military applications but never approved for any civilian use. We're talking about something that could cause severe developmental damage in children, potentially permanent. The weight of those words hit Ray like a physical blow. Jesus, Maria, how did something like that end up in a child's toy? That's what we need to find out. And Ray, there's more. I just got off the phone with the FBI. They want to take over this case. Ray was already getting dressed, his mind racing. The FBI? Why would they? Because this isn't an isolated incident. They have been tracking similar reports across 3 other states. Children's toys with hidden compartments containing various chemical substances. Ray, we might be looking at a coordinated attack on kids. The drive to the police station felt endless. Ray's thoughts kept returning to Mia's innocent face as she'd reached for that purple-wrapped box, not knowing how close she'd come to disaster. Max had saved her life, but how many other children hadn't been so lucky? At the station, Detective Santos introduced Ray to Special Agent Lisa Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in cases involving crimes against children. Agent Chen's expression was grim as she spread files across the conference table. "Officer Martinez, I understand your canine partner was instrumental in discovering the contaminated toy," Agent Chen began. "His actions may have prevented a tragedy and given us our first solid lead in a case that's been puzzling us for weeks." Ray leaned forward, studying the files. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Agent Chen opened the first file, revealing photos of various children's toys, stuffed animals, action figures, dolls. 3 weeks ago, a 7-year-old boy in Michigan was hospitalized after playing with a toy robot. The parents thought he had the flu at first. Headaches, nausea, confusion, but the symptoms got worse instead of better. Exactly. The doctors couldn't figure out what was causing it until the boy's older sister remembered that he'd been carrying the robot everywhere. They x-rayed the toy and found a hidden compartment with traces of an industrial solvent that had slowly been leaking out. Agent Chen turned to the next file. 2 days later, a 5-year-old girl in Texas had a similar reaction to a stuffed elephant. Same story, hidden compartment, dangerous chemicals, parents who had no idea their child was being slowly poisoned. Ray felt sick. Are the children okay? The boy in Michigan is recovering, but he'll need months of therapy to overcome the neurological damage. The girl in Texas, Agent Chen paused. She's still in the hospital. The doctors aren't sure if the effects will be permanent. Detective Santos placed a cup of coffee in front of Ray, but he couldn't bring himself to drink it. Agent Chen, all these toys, are they from the same company? That's where it gets interesting. Different manufacturers, different retailers, but there's a connection. All the toys were ordered online through social media advertisements targeting parents of young children, and all the ads traced back to shell companies that eventually connect to a larger network. Agent Chen pulled out her laptop and opened a series of screenshots. Starglow Toys, the company that manufactured Mia's unicorn, is just one of at least a dozen fake toy companies operating through social media platforms. They create flashy advertisements, offer toys at prices that seem too good to be true, and target specific demographics. Ray studied the screenshots. The advertisements looked legitimate. Happy children playing with colorful toys, smiling parents, professional photography. But now, knowing what he knew, there was something unsettling about the images. "How are they choosing their targets?" Ray asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out. At first we thought it was random, but there might be a pattern. The families in Michigan and Texas both have something in common with Mia's family." Detective Santos looked up from her notes. "Which is?" Agent Chen hesitated. "All three families have lost a parent in the last 5 years. Single mothers raising children, or in one case, a single father. They're advertising specifically to vulnerable families." Ray felt a chill run down his spine. Sarah had been raising Mia alone since David died. The idea that someone was deliberately targeting grieving families, using their children as weapons in some twisted scheme, made his stomach turn. "There's something else," Agent Chen continued. "We've been monitoring the social media accounts associated with these fake companies. Yesterday, after news of Mia's birthday party incident started spreading locally, several of the accounts posted the same message." She turned her laptop screen toward Ray and Detective Santos. The message was simple but chilling. Quality control issues resolved. New inventory arriving soon. "They know we're on to them," Ray said, "which means they're going to either shut down or escalate. And based on their pattern so far, I'm betting on escalation." Agent Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it quickly, and her expression grew even more serious. "We just got confirmation from the CDC. The chemical compound found in Mia's toy is identical to the substances found in Michigan and Texas. Same manufacturer, same concentration, same delivery method." Detective Santos leaned back in her chair. "So, we're definitely dealing with intentional contamination." "Without a doubt. Someone is deliberately putting dangerous chemicals inside children's toys and distributing them to specific families. The question is why?" Ray thought about Max's reaction to the toy, how the dog had known instantly that something was wrong. "Agent Chen, have any of the other families had pets that reacted to the toys?" "Interesting you should ask. The family in Michigan mentioned that their cat had been acting strangely around the robot, hiding whenever the child played with it. They thought the cat was just being territorial." "And the family in Texas?" "They don't have pets, but several neighbors reported that stray dogs in the area had been agitated and barking more than usual in the days leading up to the girl's illness." Ray nodded grimly. Animals had always been better at detecting danger than humans. Max's training had made his response more dramatic and effective, but other animals had sensed the threat too. Agent Chen closed her laptop. "Officer Martinez, I'd like to bring Max in as a consultant on this case. His ability to detect these contaminated toys could be crucial in preventing more children from being hurt." "Max is retired," Ray said automatically, but even as he spoke, he knew what his answer would be. Max had spent his career protecting people, and clearly that instinct hadn't diminished with age. "I understand he's not officially working anymore, but this is an emergency situation. We need every advantage we can get." Ray thought about Mia sleeping peacefully with Max beside her, trusting the dog to keep her safe. How many other children were out there, playing with toys that could hurt them, without a protector like Max to warn their families? "I'll talk to Max," Ray said, which earned him a surprised look from Detective Santos. Ray had always talked to Max like he was human, but most people didn't understand the bond between a handler and his canine partner. "Actually," Agent Chen said with a slight smile, "I'd like to meet Max myself, and I'd like to speak with the Wilson family again. There might be details from yesterday that could help us understand how these toys are being distributed." An hour later, they were back at Sarah's house. The birthday decorations still hung from the trees, but the atmosphere was completely different. Sarah answered the door with dark circles under her eyes, clearly having slept very little. "Ray, thank goodness you're here. I've been thinking about this all night, and I remembered something that might be important." She led them into the living room, where Mia was sitting on the floor with Max, quietly coloring in a book, while the dog watched protectively. The sight of the little girl, so innocent and unaware of how close she'd come to danger, strengthened Ray's resolve to see this case through. What did you remember? Agent Chen asked gently. Sarah sat down on the couch, her hands twisting nervously. The toy, the unicorn. Katie's mom didn't just randomly buy it. She told me she saw an advertisement for it on social media that mentioned Mia specifically. Ray felt his blood run cold. What do you mean, specifically? The ad said something like, "Perfect gift for girls named Mia," and showed a picture of a unicorn just like the one we found yesterday. Katie's mom thought it was a coincidence, like those personalized ads you see sometimes, but now, Agent Chen was already taking notes. Do you know which social media platform she saw the ad on? Facebook, I think. She said she clicked on it because it seemed like such a perfect match for Mia's birthday. The implications were staggering. These weren't random attacks. They were targeted, personalized attempts to get specific children to interact with contaminated toys. Someone had enough information about Mia to create an advertisement mentioning her by name. Sarah, Agent Chen said carefully, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has anyone been asking about Mia recently? Any strangers, unusual phone calls, people showing unusual interest in your family? Sarah thought for a moment. There was something, actually. About 2 weeks ago, I got a call from someone claiming to be conducting a survey about single mothers and child safety. They asked a lot of questions about Mia, her age, her interests, what kinds of toys she liked. I thought it was legitimate market research. Ray and Agent Chen exchanged glances. The pieces were starting to come together in a disturbing pattern. Did they ask about your husband? Agent Chen asked. Yes, they knew David had died. They said the survey was specifically for single mothers who had lost their spouse. They seemed very sympathetic, very understanding. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Agent Chen made more notes. Sarah, I'm going to need you to try to remember everything you can about that phone call. Any details, no matter how small, could be important. While Agent Chen interviewed Sarah, Ray sat down on the floor next to Mia and Max. The little girl looked up at him with curious eyes. Uncle Ray, why are all these people here asking questions about my birthday? Ray chose his words carefully. Remember how Max found something bad in your present yesterday? Well, these people are trying to make sure no other kids get bad presents like that. Mia nodded solemnly. Max is really smart, isn't he? The smartest, Ray agreed, scratching behind the dog's ears. Max looked up at him with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Agent Chen finished her interview with Sarah and walked over to where Ray was sitting. Officer Martinez, would it be possible for Max to examine some other toys? We have evidence from the Michigan and Texas cases that we could use for comparison. Ray looked at Max, who was still alert despite his retirement. What do you think, boy? Ready to go back to work? Max's tail wagged once, a subtle but clear indication that he understood what was being asked of him. I'll take that as a yes, Ray said, standing up. But I want to be clear. Max's safety comes first. If there's any risk to him from these chemicals, we'll take every precaution, Agent Chen assured him. The evidence will be properly contained, and we'll have veterinary support on standby. As they prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed Ray's arm. Ray, I keep thinking, what if Katie's family had given Mia that toy when I wasn't around? What if she had opened it in her room alone? The thought was almost too horrible to contemplate. Without Max's presence and protective instincts, Mia could have been exposed to the chemical compound with no one around to help her. The outcome could have been tragically different. But that didn't happen, Ray said firmly. Max was there, and he did his job. Now we need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. At the FBI field office, Agent Chen led Ray and Max into a specialized lab where the evidence from all 3 cases had been assembled. The contaminated toys were sealed in clear containers, but Max's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His ears went up, his body tensed, and he began the same low growling he'd exhibited at Mia's party. As Agent Chen moved the containers closer, Max's alerts became more pronounced, confirming what everyone already suspected. All 3 toys contained similar chemical compounds. It's definitely the same source, Agent Chen observed, watching Max's reactions. But there's something else. Max, can you tell us which one has the strongest concentration? Ray watched his partner carefully as Agent Chen presented each container. Max's reaction was strongest to the stuffed elephant from Texas, the toy that had hospitalized the 5-year-old girl who was still fighting for her recovery. The Texas toy has the highest concentration, Ray interpreted. They're experimenting, trying to find the right dosage for whatever they're trying to accomplish. Agent Chen nodded grimly, which means the attacks are escalating. Each batch of toys is more dangerous than the last. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the FBI's consulting chemist, joined them in the lab. I've been analyzing the chemical signatures from all 3 toys. The compounds are being manufactured in the same facility, but they're being refined and concentrated with each batch. It's like someone is perfecting a formula. Ray felt a chill of recognition. Agent Chen, you said these families were being targeted. What if this isn't about hurting random children? What if someone is using kids as test subjects? The lab fell silent as the implications of Ray's words sank in. If he was right, then Mia and the other children weren't victims of a random attack. They were unwilling participants in some kind of twisted experiment. Dr. Walsh, Agent Chen said urgently, how sophisticated would someone need to be to manufacture these compounds and hide them in toys? Very sophisticated. We're talking about someone with advanced chemistry knowledge, access to specialized equipment, and detailed understanding of how to weaponize chemical agents. This isn't some amateur operation. Agent Chen's phone rang, and she answered it immediately. Ray watched her expression change from concern to alarm as she listened to whoever was on the other end. When? She asked sharply. How many? A pause. We'll be right there. She hung up and turned to Ryan Dr. Walsh. We have a new development. A toy store in Portland just reported that several customers have returned toys because their pets were acting aggressively around them. The store manager called it in because she remembered the news reports about Max's reaction to the contaminated unicorn. Ray was already reaching for Max's leash. How many toys are we talking about? 17, all purchased in the last week, all from different families, all causing the same reaction in household pets. The drive to Portland felt endless. Ray sat in the back of Agent Chen's SUV with Max, watching the dog's alert posture as they raced toward what could be the biggest break in the case. 17 contaminated toys meant 17 families at risk, 17 children who could be in immediate danger. The toy store was already cordoned off by local police when they arrived. The manager, a woman in her 50s named Helen Rodriguez, met them at the entrance with a box full of returned toys. I've been running this store for 20 years, Helen said, her voice shaking. I've never seen anything like this. The parents were all saying the same thing. Their dogs and cats were going crazy around these toys, acting like there was something dangerous about them. Agent Chen examined the contents of the box. The toys were all different. Dolls, action figures, stuffed animals, toy cars. But they all had one thing in common. Max's reaction to the box was immediate and intense. They're all contaminated, Ray said, watching Max's body language. Every single one. Helen, Agent Chen said, I need you to tell me everything you can about where these toys came from. Did they all come from the same distributor? Helen consulted her inventory records. No, that's the strange thing. They came from 5 different suppliers, all companies I'd never heard of before, but they all contacted me within the same week, offering deals that were too good to pass up. Ray felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Agent Chen, they're not just targeting individual families anymore. They're going after toy stores, trying to get contaminated products into the general population. Which means we're running out of time, Agent Chen replied grimly. If they're scaling up their operation, we could be looking at hundreds of contaminated toys hitting the market. Helen overheard their conversation and went pale. Are you saying these toys could have hurt children? I sold dozens of toys from these same suppliers in the past week. Agent Chen was already on her phone, calling for backup and coordination with local authorities. They needed to track down every toy that had been sold from the contaminated shipments, and they needed to do it fast. As the investigation expanded, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial. The attacks were too coordinated, too sophisticated, and too well funded to be the work of a small group. Someone with serious resources and connections was behind this, and they were getting bolder. Max stayed close to Ray's side as they worked, the dog's instincts telling him that the danger was far from over. And as the sun set over Portland, Ray realized that his partner was right. This was just the beginning. What they discovered next would expose a conspiracy that reached far beyond contaminated toys, threatening the safety of children across the entire country. But do you think Max and Ray are ready for what's coming next? The morning news changed everything. Ray was eating breakfast when his phone exploded with notifications. Every major news network was running the same story. Nationwide toy contamination scandal rocks America. Heroic police dog saves lives. The story had gone viral overnight. Videos of Max at Mia's birthday party, security footage from the Portland toy store, interviews with the families from Michigan and Texas. Social media was flooded with parents checking their children's toys, pet owners sharing stories of their animals acting strangely around certain products. But it was the phone call at 7:23 a.m. that really shook Ray to his core. "Officer Martinez, this is Rebecca Chen, and I think someone tried to hurt my daughter because of what happened to yours." Ray sat up straighter. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "Your story is all over the news, about the dog finding the bad chemical in the toy. Well, last night someone broke into our house. They didn't take anything valuable. They went straight to my daughter's room and stole all her toys. Every single one." Ray felt ice run through his veins. "Mrs. Chen, where do you live?" "Sacramento, about 3 hours from where you are. Officer Martinez, I'm scared. Why would someone break into a house just to steal a 4-year-old's toys?" Before Ray could answer, his call waiting beeped. Agent Chen's name flashed on the screen. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to call the FBI immediately. Ask for Agent Lisa Chen. She's handling this case. And don't let your daughter out of your sight." Ray switched to Agent Chen's call, his heart pounding. "Ray, we have a situation. 5 break-ins last night, all families with young children, all had their toys stolen. Someone is trying to cover their tracks. But why steal toys that might not even be contaminated? Because they don't know which ones are contaminated and which ones aren't. They're grabbing everything to avoid leaving evidence behind." Ray was already getting dressed, Max watching him with alert eyes. "Where do you need us?" "Sacramento. The local FBI office is coordinating with police, but we need Max to check any toys they might have missed. Ray, there's something else. We got a message." "What kind of message?" Agent Chen's voice was tight. "Someone called the Sacramento FBI office at 6 a.m. Male voice, digitally distorted. He said, 'The dog made you notice too early. We're not finished yet.'" The drive to Sacramento felt like the longest 3 hours of Ray's life. Max rode in the passenger seat, his ears pricked forward as if he could sense the urgency of their mission. Agent Chen had arranged for them to meet at the Rebecca Chen residence first, since her call had come in before the FBI had contacted the other families. The Chen house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where children rode bikes in the street and neighbors knew each other's names. Yellow police tape cordoned off the front door, and 2 FBI agents were interviewing Mrs. Chen on her front porch. Rebecca Chen was a small woman in her 30s, with tired eyes and protective arms wrapped around a little girl with pigtails. The sight reminded Ray painfully of Sarah and Mia. "Mrs. Chen," Agent Chen approached gently, "this is Officer Martinez and his partner Max. They're the ones who found the contaminated toy that started this investigation." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Officer Martinez, when I saw your story on the news, I realized how close Emma might have come to being hurt. But then, when they broke in—" "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Ray asked, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. "Hi, Emma. This is Max. He's very good at finding things that don't belong." Emma smiled shyly and reached out to pet Max, who gently nuzzled her hand. Even in the midst of a crisis, the dog's training kicked in, offering comfort to a scared child. "They came in through Emma's bedroom window," Rebecca explained. "The weird thing is, they could have taken my laptop, my jewelry, cash I had in the kitchen drawer. Instead, they went straight to Emma's toy box in her closet. They took everything: stuffed animals, dolls, blocks, even her art supplies." Agent Chen was taking notes. "Did Emma have any toys that were recently purchased? Anything ordered online in the last month?" Rebecca nodded. "My mother-in-law ordered a teddy bear for Emma from some company she saw advertised on Facebook. It arrived about a week ago. Emma loved it, carried it everywhere." Ray felt Max tense beside him. "Mrs. Chen, do you remember what this teddy bear looked like?" "Brown fur, red ribbon around its neck, really soft. Emma named him Coco. She was heartbroken when she realized he was gone." Agent Chen and Ray exchanged glances. The description matched the pattern they had seen with the other contaminated toys. High-quality appearance, appealing to children, ordered through social media advertisements. "Mrs. Chen," Agent Chen said carefully, "we need to check Emma's room for any chemical residue, If that teddy bear was contaminated and Emma was carrying it around, the implication hung in the air. Rebecca pulled Emma closer. She's been fine. No symptoms, no illness, but she has been having nightmares since the bear disappeared. Ray knelt down again, this time speaking directly to Emma. Emma, can you tell me about Coco? Did he smell funny, or did any of your other animals act weird around him? Emma thought for a moment. Whiskers didn't like him. Who's Whiskers? Ray asked. Our cat, Rebecca explained. Now that Emma mentions it, Whiskers did avoid Emma's room when she had the bear in there. I thought he was just being moody. Once again, an animal had sensed danger that the humans had missed. Ray made a mental note to recommend that the FBI start advising families to pay attention to their pets' behavior around new toys. The crime scene team had finished processing Emma's room, and Max was cleared to enter. The moment they stepped through the bedroom door, Max began exhibiting the same alertness he'd shown at Mia's party and at the Portland toy store. He's picking up something, Ray said, watching Max's body language carefully. Max moved methodically around the room, his nose working overtime. He paused at the spot where Emma's toy box had been, then moved to the closet where her stuffed animals had been stored. His low whine indicated he was detecting trace amounts of the chemical compounds they'd been tracking. The contaminated bear was definitely here, Ray confirmed. Max is picking up residual scents. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it quickly, her expression growing more concerned. Ray, we need to get to the next house immediately. The Oakland police just found something at the Rodriguez family break-in. The Rodriguez house was in chaos when they arrived. Unlike the quiet, careful burglary at the Chen residence, this had been violent and destructive. Furniture was overturned, windows were broken, and Mrs. Rodriguez was being treated by paramedics for cuts on her hands from broken glass. What happened here? Agent Chen asked the lead detective. Mrs. Rodriguez heard the intruders in her son's room around 2 a.m. When she went to investigate, they attacked her. But here's the strange part. They still only took toys, left behind electronics, cash, even left her purse sitting open on the kitchen counter. Ray surveyed the damage, Max alert and tense beside him. This wasn't just about stealing evidence. They were sending a message. Agent Chen nodded grimly. The message being, stay quiet or this could get worse. Mrs. Rodriguez, despite her injuries, insisted on talking to them. She was a tough woman in her 40s who worked as a night shift nurse. Her protective instincts were in overdrive when it came to her 7-year-old son, Miguel. They went crazy when they couldn't find Miguel's robot, she explained, wincing as the paramedic cleaned a cut on her arm. He'd taken it to his grandmother's house for a sleepover. When they realized it wasn't here, they started destroying everything. Mrs. Rodriguez, Ray said gently, this robot, was it recently purchased? Last month. Miguel saw an ad for it online and begged me to order it. It was expensive, but he'd been so good about his schoolwork, I wanted to surprise him. The same pattern again. Social media advertisement, targeting specific children, high-quality toys that appealed to kids and parents alike. Where is Miguel now? Agent Chen asked. Still at his grandmother's house. I called her this morning and told her not to bring him home until I said it was safe. Officer Martinez, what is happening? Why would someone break into houses just to steal children's toys? Ray looked at Max, who was still showing signs of chemical detection, despite the absence of any toys in the house. Mrs. Rodriguez, we believe some toys are being manufactured with dangerous chemicals hidden inside them. The people behind this are trying to cover up the evidence. You mean Miguel's robot could have hurt him? We don't know for sure, but we'd like to have it tested. Would you be willing to bring it in? Mrs. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. Absolutely. If there's even a chance it could hurt Miguel or other children, you can have it. As they left the Rodriguez house, Agent Chen received another call. This time, her face went completely pale as she listened. What is it? Ray asked when she hung up. The warehouse. We found their distribution center. The warehouse was located in an industrial area outside Stockton, about an hour's drive from Sacramento. It looked completely ordinary from the outside, a gray metal building with no signage, surrounded by a chain-link fence. But the smell hit Max immediately as they approached the building. The dog's reaction was more intense than Ray had ever seen. Max wasn't just alerting to danger, he was practically vibrating with agitation, his training telling him that this place was the source of everything they had been tracking. Easy boy, Ray said, keeping a firm grip on Max's leash. I know you smell it. The FBI tactical team had already secured the building, but what they found inside was worse than anyone had imagined. The warehouse contained thousands of toys in various stages of modification, workstations equipped with chemical handling equipment, injection systems for hiding substances inside seemingly innocent products, and shipping materials addressed to toy stores across the western United States. But it was the office area that provided the most disturbing discoveries. Agent Chen led Ray through rows of computers displaying spreadsheets and databases. "Ray, look at this. They weren't just randomly contaminating toys. They were targeting specific children based on detailed profiles." The computer screens showed lists of names, ages, addresses, and family information. Mia Wilson was there, along with Emma Chen, Miguel Rodriguez, and dozens of other children. Each profile included notes about the family's financial situation, recent tragedies, and even details about pets in the household. "They knew about Max," Ray said, reading Mia's profile with growing horror. "They knew she had an uncle who was a police officer with a retired canine partner." "Which means they chose to send her a contaminated toy anyway," Agent Chen said. "They were either testing Max's detection abilities, or they were confident their chemical concealment methods would work even against a trained dog." Ray studied the profiles more carefully. "Agent Chen, look at the pattern. Single-parent households, families dealing with loss, kids who might be emotionally vulnerable. They weren't just testing chemicals. They were targeting the most defenseless families they could find." One of the FBI technicians called Agent Chen over to another computer. "Agent Chen, you need to see this. We found their communication logs." The messages revealed a sophisticated operation with connections across multiple states and countries, references to Phase 1 testing, subject response data, and preparation for nationwide distribution. But it was the most recent messages that made Ray's blood run cold. Subject canine interference requires acceleration of timeline, move to Phase 2 immediately, eliminate detection risk. Agent Chen looked at Ray grimly. "They're talking about Max. He's disrupted their entire operation, and now they're changing their plans because of him." "What's Phase 2? Ray asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. The FBI technician pulled up another file. Based on these documents, Phase 2 involves mass distribution through major retail chains. Instead of targeting specific families, they're planning to contaminate toys going into stores nationwide. Thousands of children could be affected. Ray felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were uncovering. This wasn't just about a few contaminated toys. It was about a systematic attack on children across the entire country, using their own toys as weapons against them. Max was still agitated, pulling toward a section of the warehouse they hadn't explored yet. Ray decided to trust his partner's instincts. "Agent Chen, Max wants to show us something else." They followed Max to a locked storage room in the back of the warehouse. When the tactical team forced the door open, they discovered the most damning evidence yet. Boxes and boxes of toys ready for shipment, all containing hidden chemical chambers, all addressed to major toy store chains across America. "There must be 10,000 toys in here," Agent Chen said, surveying the massive stockpile. "If these had made it to market..." Ray didn't want to think about the implications. 10,000 contaminated toys distributed to unsuspecting families, with no way to track or recall them once they were sold. Children across the country could have been poisoned, with no one understanding what was making them sick. But as they cataloged the evidence, Ray noticed something that made him even more concerned. Mixed in with the regular toy shipments were boxes marked with a different symbol, a red star. "What are these?" he asked one of the technicians. The technician opened one of the red star boxes and immediately stepped back. "Agent Chen, we need hazmat suits. The chemical concentration in these toys is at least 10 times higher than anything we've seen before." Agent Chen was already on her radio, calling for additional support. "Ray, we need to get everyone out of here until hazmat can secure these high-concentration items." As they evacuated the warehouse, Ray's mind was racing. The operation was even more sophisticated and dangerous than they'd realized. Someone had been planning a coordinated chemical attack on American children, using the toys they loved and trusted as delivery systems. But who was behind it, and why were they targeting children specifically? The answer came in a manila folder found in the warehouse office, labeled Project Innocence. Inside were documents that revealed the true scope of the conspiracy, and it reached far higher than anyone had imagined. The files contained communications with international chemical suppliers, payments traced to offshore accounts, and most disturbing of all, correspondence with individuals identified only by code names. But one name appeared repeatedly throughout the documents: Dr. Marcus Vance, a former chemical weapons researcher who had been dismissed from a government position 5 years earlier for conducting unauthorized experiments. "Agent Chen," Ray said, handing her the folder, "I think we found our mastermind." Agent Chen read through the documents quickly, her expression growing more alarmed with each page. "Ray, Dr. Vance isn't just some rogue scientist. According to this, he's been working with a network of individuals who have grievances against the US government. They're using children as test subjects for chemical agents that could eventually be used in larger attacks. So the contaminated toys were never meant to be a one-time thing. They were testing different chemical formulations and delivery methods for something bigger." Exactly. And based on the timeline in these documents, Phase 2 was supposed to launch next week. If Max hadn't detected that chemical in Mia's toy, thousands of families would have received contaminated products with no warning. Ray looked back at the warehouse, where hazmat teams were now working to secure the high-concentration toys. Max had saved not just Mia's life, but potentially the lives of countless other children across the country. But as they prepared to leave the crime scene, Agent Chen received one final call that changed everything. "Agent Chen," the voice on the phone was tight with urgency, "we just intercepted communications from Dr. Vance's network. They know about the warehouse raid, and they're implementing something called Protocol Zero. All remaining contaminated toys are being rushed to distribution immediately." Agent Chen looked at Ray with an expression of pure dread. "Ray, they're not shutting down the operation. They're accelerating it. Every contaminated toy they have left is being shipped out right now, before we can stop them." The race was on. Somewhere out there, trucks loaded with poisoned toys were heading towards stores and distribution centers across America. Children's lives hung in the balance, and the only thing standing between them and disaster was a retired police dog with an extraordinary nose and an unshakable determination to protect the innocent. But would Max and the FBI team be able to track down every contaminated shipment before they reached their destinations? And what would Dr. Vance do next when he realized his entire operation had been exposed? The answers to these questions would determine whether this story ended in victory or tragedy for families across the nation. Do you think they'll be able to stop every contaminated toy from reaching innocent children, or is Dr. Vance one step ahead of them? The truth was worse than anyone could have imagined. As FBI teams raced across the country to intercept contaminated toy shipments, a discovery at Dr. Marcus Vance's private laboratory revealed the real purpose behind Project Innocence. What they found would shake the investigation to its core and expose a betrayal that reached the highest levels of power. Agent Chen's phone rang at 4:47 a.m., jarring her awake in her Sacramento hotel room. The voice on the other end belonged to FBI Director Harrison Walsh, and his tone was deadly serious. "Agent Chen, we've located Dr. Vance's primary laboratory. You and Officer Martinez need to get there immediately. And Agent Chen, bring the dog. We're going to need him." Ray was already awake when Agent Chen called. Max had been restless all night, pacing around the hotel room as if he could sense that their work was far from over. The drive to the laboratory took them into the mountains east of Sacramento, to a facility that looked more like a fortress than a research center. This place has been operating under the cover of a legitimate pharmaceutical company for 3 years, Agent Chen explained as they approached the heavily guarded compound. Vance Tech Industries. They've been conducting what they claim was pediatric medicine research. Ray felt sick, using children's health as a cover for chemical weapons development. It gets worse. We've traced the funding for Vance Tech back to a consortium of international investors, but also to several domestic sources that are going to shock you. The laboratory complex was massive, far larger than the warehouse they had raided the day before. FBI tactical teams had already secured the perimeter, but the main laboratory building remained sealed, pending the arrival of specialized hazmat units. Director Walsh met them at the command post, his expression grim. "Agent Chen, Officer Martinez, what we're about to show you is classified at the highest levels. The scope of this conspiracy goes far beyond what we initially understood." He led them to a mobile command center where dozens of monitors displayed feeds from cameras throughout the laboratory complex. Dr. Vance has been developing what he calls behavioral modification compounds, chemicals designed to alter children's brain chemistry in subtle but permanent ways. Ray stared at the screens in horror. You're saying he wasn't trying to kill children. He was trying to control them. Exactly. The contaminated toys were delivery systems for experimental drugs designed to make children more compliant, less questioning, easier to manipulate. Phase 2 wasn't about mass poisoning, it was about mass mind control. Agent Chen was studying documents spread across a table. Director Walsh, some of these funding sources, are these really from? Yes. Members of Congress, defense contractors, and at least 2 cabinet-level officials have been funding this research. They believed they were investing in educational enhancement technology. The implications were staggering. A network of powerful individuals had unknowingly funded an operation designed to chemically alter the minds of American children, believing they were supporting legitimate educational research. There's more, Director Walsh continued. We've intercepted communications indicating that Dr. Vance has been selling information about his compounds to foreign governments. What started as a domestic mind control experiment has become an international security threat. Max had been sitting quietly beside Ray, but suddenly his ears perked up and he began the low growling that indicated chemical detection. Ray looked around the command post, confused. Max is alerting to something, Ray said, but we're not near any of the contaminated materials. Director Walsh checked his watch. The wind shifted about 10 minutes ago. If your dog is detecting chemicals from this distance, the concentration inside that laboratory must be extremely high. Agent Chen was studying satellite images of the complex. Director Walsh, how many people were working in this facility? According to employment records, about 50 researchers and support staff. But here's the problem. When our teams moved in this morning, the facility was completely empty. Every computer had been wiped, every document shredded, and every piece of equipment destroyed. Ray felt a chill of recognition. They knew we were coming. Someone warned them. That's what we're afraid of, which means we have a leak somewhere in the investigation, someone with access to our operational plans. The hazmat teams finished their preliminary sweep and gave the all-clear for Ray and Max to enter the outer areas of the laboratory complex. The moment they stepped inside, Max's behavior became intensely focused. He wasn't just detecting chemicals, he was tracking something specific. He's following a scent trail, Ray explained, watching Max move methodically through the corridors. Someone or something he's tracked before. The laboratory facility was like nothing Ray had ever seen. Rooms filled with sophisticated chemical analysis equipment, storage areas containing thousands of vials with coded labels, and most disturbing of all, testing chambers designed to simulate children's bedrooms and play areas. They were testing how children would interact with the contaminated toys in controlled environments, Agent Chen said, examining one of the testing chambers. Look at these observation notes. They documented everything. How long it took for chemicals to be absorbed, behavioral changes in test subjects, optimal delivery methods. Ray's stomach turned. Test subjects? Please tell me they weren't using actual children. Agent Chen read through more of the scattered papers that the facility's occupants had missed in their hasty evacuation. It looks like they used lab animals initially, but there are references to field testing with volunteer families. Ray, I think some of the families we've been investigating weren't random targets. They were willing participants. The idea that some parents might have knowingly exposed their children to experimental chemicals in exchange for money was almost too horrible to contemplate. But as they found more evidence, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. Max led them to a section of the laboratory that had been more thoroughly cleaned than the rest. His alertness was extreme here, indicating high concentrations of the chemical compounds they'd been tracking. This was their primary mixing facility, Ray said, interpreting Max's behavior, where they prepared the concentrated chemicals for injection into toys. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an urgent text message. She read it quickly, her face going pale. Ray, we just got confirmation from the CDC, the chemical compound from Mia's toy. It's not just a behavioral modification drug. It's a compound that causes permanent neurological damage if exposure continues over time. But Mia was only exposed for a few minutes before Max found the toy, which is probably what saved her life. But the children in Michigan and Texas who played with contaminated toys for days or weeks before showing symptoms, the neurological damage might be irreversible. Ray thought about the little girl in Texas who was still in the hospital, still fighting to recover from her exposure. The idea that her condition might be permanent filled him with rage at the people responsible for this horror. They continued through the facility, Max leading them deeper into the complex. In what appeared to be Dr. Vance's personal office, they found evidence that would change the entire investigation. Hidden behind a false wall, Agent Chen discovered a safe containing documents that Dr. Vance had been unable to destroy in his hurried evacuation. The papers revealed the true scope of Project Innocence and identified the conspiracy's most shocking participant. "Ray," Agent Chen said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." The documents showed that Dr. Vance had been reporting directly to someone identified only as the architect, but cross-referenced with financial records and communication logs, the identity of the architect became clear. Senator Patricia Hawthorne, the chair of the Senate Committee on Child Welfare and Education, had been the primary coordinator of the entire operation. Senator Hawthorne has been pushing legislation for increased federal funding of educational enhancement programs, Agent Chen said, reading through the documents. She was planning to use the results of Dr. Vance's research to justify massive government spending on programs that would have exposed millions of children to these chemicals. Ray felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. She was going to poison an entire generation of American children and call it education reform. It's worse than that. Look at these financial projections. The companies that would have received government contracts to implement these programs are all owned by the same consortium of investors who funded Dr. Vance's research. They would have made billions of dollars while permanently damaging children's minds. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. A sitting U.S. senator, working with defense contractors and international investors, had orchestrated a plan to chemically alter the brains of American children while profiting from government contracts to do so. But as Ray and Agent Chen absorbed the implications of their discovery, Max's behavior changed dramatically. His alertness shifted from chemical detection to something Ray recognized from their years of working together, the focused attention that meant someone was approaching. "We've got company," Ray said quietly, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. The sound of vehicles outside confirmed Ray's instincts. Through the laboratory windows, they could see black SUVs surrounding the building, but these weren't FBI vehicles. Agent Chen was already on her radio, trying to contact the command post, but got only static in response. "Someone's jamming our communications." "Agent Chen, Officer Martinez," a voice called through the building's intercom system. "I believe you found some documents that belong to me." Ray recognized the voice from news broadcasts and Senate hearings. Senator Patricia Hawthorne was speaking to them directly. "Senator Hawthorne," Agent Chen called back, "you need to surrender yourself. We have evidence of your involvement in Project Innocence." Hawthorne's laugh was cold and calculating. "Agent Chen, you have evidence of a patriotic effort to enhance American children's educational capabilities. What you're calling a conspiracy, I call progress." Ray realized they were trapped. The laboratory complex had only one exit, and Hawthorne's people had surrounded the building, but Max was still alert, still tracking something that Ray hadn't identified yet. "Senator, children have been seriously injured by your experimental chemicals," Ray called out. "A 5-year-old girl in Texas may never fully recover." "Acceptable casualties in the pursuit of national advancement," Hawthorne replied coldly. "Officer Martinez, your dog has been quite troublesome to our operation. Such a shame that he'll have to be eliminated along with the evidence you've discovered." The threat to Max triggered something primal in Ray. He'd lost partners before, but the idea of someone deliberately targeting Max filled him with protective fury. "Agent Chen," Ray said quietly, "Max is still tracking something. I think there might be another way out of here." They followed Max deeper into the laboratory complex, the dog leading them through a series of corridors that seemed to slope downward. Agent Chen consulted the building plans they had downloaded before entering the facility. "According to these blueprints, there should be a service tunnel that connects to the adjacent building," she said. "If Max is tracking something in that direction..." The service tunnel was exactly where Agent Chen had predicted, hidden behind an unmarked door in the basement level of the laboratory. Max's excitement increased as they approached the tunnel entrance, confirming that his nose was leading them in the right direction. But as they prepared to enter the tunnel, they heard footsteps echoing through the laboratory above them. Hawthorne's people were searching the building, looking for the evidence and the witnesses who could expose the full scope of Project Innocence. "Ray," Agent Chen whispered, "even if we get out of here, Hawthorne has connections throughout the government. She could bury this investigation and eliminate everyone who knows the truth." Ray looked at Max, whose intelligent eyes seemed to understand the gravity of their situation. Then we make sure the truth gets out before she can stop us. The service tunnel led to an adjacent building that had once been part of the Vance Tech complex but was now abandoned. From there, they were able to make their way to a maintenance road that connected to the main highway. But as they reached their vehicle, Agent Chen's phone finally reconnected to the FBI network. The messages that flooded in painted a terrifying picture of how far Hawthorne's influence reached. Ray, Director Walsh has been relieved of command. Agent Thompson, who was coordinating the toy recall efforts, has been arrested on charges of evidence tampering, and the families we've been working with, Sarah and Mia, the Chens, the Rodriguez family, they have all been taken into protective custody. Protective custody by whom? That's what I'm afraid to find out. Ray, I think Hawthorne is cleaning house. Everyone who knows about Project Innocence is being silenced. They drove in tense silence, Max alert in the back seat as if sensing the danger that surrounded them. Ray's mind was racing, trying to figure out how to expose a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of government when the very people who should be investigating it were either compromised or eliminated. Agent Chen, Ray said finally, we need to get this evidence to someone who can't be bought or intimidated, someone outside the government structure. Who did you have in mind? Ray pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Jessica Morgan. She's an investigative journalist who's been exposing government corruption for 20 years. If anyone can get this story out before Hawthorne shuts us down, it's her. Agent Chen nodded. Do it. But Ray, once we go public with this, there's no going back. Hawthorne will use every resource she has to discredit us and cover up the evidence. Then we better make sure our story is airtight, Ray replied, dialing Jessica's number. The phone call that followed would set in motion events that would expose Project Innocence to the American people and bring down one of the most powerful conspiracies in modern political history. But it would also put Ray, Agent Chen, Max, and every family they had been trying to protect in mortal danger. As they raced toward their meeting with Jessica Morgan, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Max's continued alertness confirmed his suspicions. Senator Hawthorne's reach was longer than they'd imagined, and the final confrontation was just beginning. The battle for the truth was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But will Ray and Max be able to expose the conspiracy before Hawthorne silences them forever? What do you think Senator Hawthorne will do when she realizes the truth is about to come out? The meeting with Jessica Morgan changed everything. Within hours of their secret rendezvous at a remote truck stop outside Sacramento, the story that would bring down Senator Patricia Hawthorne and expose Project Innocence was racing across every major news network in America. But Jessica's investigation revealed one final twist that no one saw coming, and it would lead to the most emotional courtroom testimony in modern history. Jessica Morgan had built her reputation on exposing government corruption, but even she was stunned by the evidence Ray and Agent Chen presented. The documents from Dr. Vance's laboratory, the chemical analysis reports, and the financial records linking Senator Hawthorne to the conspiracy painted a picture of betrayal that reached the highest levels of American government. This is bigger than Watergate, Jessica said, photographing each document with professional precision. Ray, when this story breaks, every parent in America is going to want answers. Are you prepared for that level of attention? Ray looked at Max, who had remained calm and alert throughout their clandestine meeting. Jessica, if it means protecting children from people like Hawthorne and Dr. Vance, we're ready for whatever comes. Within 6 hours, Jessica's story was the lead on every major news network. Senator's secret, chemical mind control plot exposed by Hero Police Dog dominated headlines across the country. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media exploded with parents sharing photos of toys they had thrown away, pet owners describing their animals' strange behavior around certain products, and families demanding answers about the safety of children's products in their homes. The hashtag #MaxTheHero began trending nationwide as people shared the story of the retired K-Nee, who had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened millions of children. But Senator Hawthorne's response was swift and vicious. Within hours of the story breaking, she held a press conference at the Capitol, flanked by lawyers and supporters. The allegations against me are completely fabricated, Hawthorne declared, her voice steady and confident. This is a politically motivated attack designed to undermine my work on behalf of America's children. Dr. Marcus Vance was a rogue researcher who deceived my committee about the nature of his work. Ray watched the press conference from his hotel room, feeling sick as Hawthorne painted herself as a victim of Dr. Vance's deception. Her performance was masterful, the concerned public servant who had been fooled by a mad scientist. "She's good," Agent Chen said grimly. "Without Dr. Vance to contradict her story, she might be able to blame everything on him and walk away clean." But Hawthorne had underestimated the power of public outrage and the determination of the families whose children had been targeted. Sarah Wilson, Emma Chen's mother Rebecca, and Mrs. Rodriguez appeared together on national television, holding their children and demanding justice. "My daughter almost died because of Senator Hawthorne's conspiracy," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "If it wasn't for Max, Mia could have been permanently brain damaged by chemicals hidden in a birthday present. How many other children have been hurt because people like Hawthorne see kids as test subjects instead of human beings?" The public testimony was devastating. Rebecca Chen described her daughter's attachment to the contaminated teddy bear, the nightmares Emma still had after it was stolen, and the terror of realizing how close they'd come to losing their child to an invisible chemical weapon. Mrs. Rodriguez, still showing faint scars from her injuries during the break-in, spoke directly to the cameras. "They attacked my family, destroyed my home, and tried to poison my son, all in the name of profit and power. Senator Hawthorne can deny it all she wants, but the evidence doesn't lie." The congressional hearing that followed was unlike anything in modern political history. The House Committee on Government Oversight called an emergency session to investigate Project Innocence, and the entire country watched as the truth finally came to light. Agent Chen was the first witness, presenting the evidence they'd gathered from the warehouse, the laboratory, and Dr. Vance's personal files. Her testimony was methodical and devastating, laying out the scope of the conspiracy in clinical detail. Project Innocence was designed to chemically alter the brain development of American children under the guise of educational enhancement, Agent Chen testified. The funding came from a network of individuals who believed they were investing in legitimate research, but the coordination and oversight came directly from Senator Hawthorne's office. The committee members pressed for details, and Agent Chen provided them. The behavioral modification compounds, the targeting of vulnerable families, the international connections that had turned American children into unwilling test subjects for chemical weapons research. But it was Ray's testimony that truly captured the nation's attention. He walked into the committee chamber with Max at his side, the retired canine wearing his old service harness for the occasion. The sight of the dignified German shepherd, alert and protective beside his handler, brought many in the audience to tears. "Max and I served together for 7 years, Ray began, his voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. In that time, he saved countless lives by detecting explosives, narcotics, and other dangers that threatened innocent people. When he alerted to that toy at Mia's birthday party, he was doing what he had always done, protecting children from harm." Ray described Max's reaction to the contaminated unicorn, the dog's unwavering determination to destroy the toy despite the confusion and protests of the adults around him. He explained how Max's trained nose had detected chemical concentrations that would have slowly poisoned Mia over days or weeks of exposure. Senator Hawthorne wants to blame Dr. Vance for everything, but the evidence shows she was coordinating this operation from the beginning. She knew children were being exposed to experimental chemicals, and she approved it because she saw profit and political advantage. The committee chair, Representative Maria Santos, leaned forward. "Officer Martinez, in your professional opinion, how many children could have been affected if Max hadn't detected that contaminated toy?" Ray looked down at Max, who was sitting calmly beside him, and then back at the committee. "Based on the evidence we found at the warehouse and laboratory, thousands of contaminated toys were ready for distribution. If those had reached families across the country, we could have been looking at the largest chemical attack on children in American history." The courtroom gallery was filled with families who had been affected by Project Innocence, and many were openly weeping as Ray described the scope of what had been prevented by Max's intervention. But the most powerful moment came when 8-year-old Mia Wilson was called to testify. Sarah had initially resisted the idea of putting her daughter through the stress of a congressional hearing, but Mia herself had insisted on speaking. "I want to tell people about Max," Mia had told her mother. "He saved my life, and other kids should know about him." Mia walked to the witness table holding Max's leash, the dog staying close to her side as she took her seat. The sight of the small girl and the protective German shepherd created a moment of absolute silence in the chamber. "Mia," Representative Santos said gently, "can you tell us what happened at your birthday party?" Mia's voice was clear and strong as she described the party, the presents, and Max's sudden change in behavior. She talked about how scared she'd been when Max destroyed her unicorn, but how Uncle Ray had explained that Max was protecting her. "Max knew the toy was bad before any of the grown-ups did," Mia said, reaching down to pet the dog's head. "He's really smart, and he loves kids. That's why he stopped me from playing with the bad present." Representative Santos's voice was thick with emotion as she asked, "Mia, how do you feel about Max now?" "He's my hero," Mia said simply. "He saved my life, and he saved other kids too. I think he should get a medal." The committee chamber erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. Even the most hardened politicians were moved by the simple honesty of a child who understood that she owed her life to a dog's protective instincts. But it was the confrontation with Senator Hawthorne that provided the climax of the hearings. Hawthorne took the witness stand with the confidence of someone who had spent decades in politics, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Representative Santos began with the financial records. "Senator Hawthorne, these documents show direct payments from your office to Dr. Vance's laboratory totaling over $2 million. How do you explain that?" "Those payments were for legitimate educational research," Hawthorne replied smoothly. "My committee was funding studies into learning enhancement technologies. I had no knowledge that Dr. Vance was conducting unauthorized experiments." Agent Chen was recalled to present the communications found in Dr. Vance's laboratory. Emails and text messages that showed Hawthorne's direct involvement in every aspect of Project Innocence, from target selection to chemical formulation to distribution planning. "Senator," Representative Santos read from one of the communications, "this email from your personal account to Dr. Vance says, Phase 2 approval confirmed. Proceed with mass distribution. Congressional funding secured. How do you explain that?" For the first time, Hawthorne's composure cracked. Those communications could have been fabricated. Dr. Vance was clearly unstable and capable of creating false evidence to implicate innocent people. But the final piece of evidence was the one that destroyed Hawthorne's credibility completely. Agent Chen presented audio recordings from Dr. Vance's laboratory, conversations between Hawthorne and the doctor discussing the effects of the chemical compounds on test subjects. In one recording, Hawthorne's voice was clearly audible. "The neurological effects are exactly what we need. Compliant, unquestioning children who will accept whatever educational content we provide. This is how we shape the next generation of American citizens." The committee chamber fell silent as the recording played. Hawthorne's own voice, discussing children as if they were laboratory animals, revealed the true depth of her callousness. "Senator Hawthorne," Representative Santos said, her voice filled with disgust, "you just heard your own voice discussing the deliberate chemical alteration of children's minds. Do you have any response?" Hawthorne sat in stunned silence for nearly a minute before her lawyers whispered urgently in her ear. When she finally spoke, her political career was over. "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." The criminal trial that followed was swift and decisive. Dr. Marcus Vance, who had been captured attempting to flee the country, agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony provided the final details of Project Innocence and confirmed Hawthorne's role as the mastermind behind the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, communications, chemical analysis, and the testimony of dozens of witnesses painted a clear picture of a conspiracy that had put thousands of children at risk for political and financial gain. Hawthorne was convicted on 14 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit chemical attacks against civilians, child endangerment, and racketeering. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dr. Vance received 25 years for his role in developing and implementing the chemical weapons program. The other conspirators, including several defense contractors and government officials, received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. But the most meaningful moment of the entire legal process came during the victim impact statements. Sarah Wilson spoke on behalf of all the families who had been targeted by Project Innocence. "Senator Hawthorne saw my daughter as a test subject," Sarah said, standing at the podium with Mia beside her. She was willing to permanently damage Mia's mind and the minds of thousands of other children for money and power. But she underestimated something: the love that people have for children, and the determination of heroes like Max to protect the innocent. As Sarah spoke, Max sat quietly beside Mia in the gallery, his presence a constant reminder of how close the conspiracy had come to succeeding. The judge, in pronouncing sentence, addressed Hawthorne directly. "You exploited the trust that parents place in their government and in the safety of their children's toys. You turned innocence itself into a weapon." The sentence of this court reflects not just the crimes you committed, but the betrayal of every value that America claims to represent. In the months that followed the trial, sweeping reforms were implemented to prevent anything like Project Innocence from happening again. The FDA was given expanded authority to inspect and test children's products. New regulations required complete disclosure of funding sources for all government research, and a national database was created to track and monitor chemicals used in consumer products. Max became a national hero, receiving medals and honors from law enforcement agencies across the country. But more importantly, his story inspired a new generation of canine teams and reminded the public of the crucial role that working dogs play in protecting society. The final scene of this incredible story took place 1 year after Mia's birthday party. The Wilson family held another celebration in their backyard, but this time it was different. Representatives from every family that had been affected by Project Innocence were there, along with Agent Chen, Jessica Morgan, and dozens of law enforcement officers who had worked to expose the conspiracy. Mia, now 9 years old and healthy, thanks to Max's intervention, stood before the crowd with a special presentation. In her hands was a custom-made medal that read Max, Hero and Protector of Children. "Max," Mia said, her voice carrying across the quiet backyard, "you saved my life and the lives of kids all across America. You're the best dog in the whole world, and you'll always be my hero." As she placed the medal around Max's neck, the crowd erupted in applause. The retired canine, now officially recognized as one of America's greatest heroes, sat proudly beside the little girl whose life he had saved with nothing more than his nose, his training, and his unshakable determination to protect the innocent. But the true victory wasn't in the medals or the recognition. It was in the knowledge that Max's actions had prevented a tragedy of unimaginable proportions, and that his legacy would continue to protect children for generations to come. In a world where innocence itself had been turned into a weapon, one dog's instincts had saved countless lives and exposed the truth that powerful people had tried to hide. Max had proven that sometimes the greatest heroes walk on 4 legs and speak with actions rather than words. And in Sarah Wilson's backyard, surrounded by the families he had helped save, Max wagged his tail once and settled down for a well-deserved rest, secure in the knowledge that he had done his job and protected the people he loved. The story of Canine Max and the birthday party that changed America will be remembered forever as proof that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the smallest acts of protection can have the biggest impact on the world. This incredible true story shows us that heroes can come from anywhere, even retired police dogs who just want to keep children safe. Let us know in the comments what you think about Max's amazing story, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us why we must always stay vigilant in protecting our most precious resource, our children.